Things have been absolutely booming for Cyberpunk 2077 as of late. CDPR just gave some updates around Cyberpunk as well as the company overall, and it's really just all good news, almost to an astonishing degree. We get some new details on future titles from CD Projekt. We got some more updates on Cyberpunk 2077's incredible success and rebound. Some of the features of future updates have even been data mined as of right now, and even an update on a potential Season 2 to Edgerunners. One of the recent updates around this game is just the fact that it is still peaking. Cyberpunk 2077 is still doing insane numbers as we approach 2 years since the release of this game. CDPR just recently tweeted saying that each day for the past 4 weeks in a row, Cyberpunk 2077 had 1 million active players. So for a month straight, there have been 1 million people each day playing Cyberpunk 2077. This is a 2-year-old game that had one of the most controversial launches in video game history. This comeback and resurgence is simply insane. And one of the things you see pretty often in these comeback situations is a huge peak and a massive fall off after the fact. But at least as of right now, as I film this video, Cyberpunk 2077 is the #2 bestseller on Steam, as well as the 17th most played game on Steam. It's not like this new craze around the game just began. Things have been going strong for over 6 weeks now. The resurgence of Cyberpunk 2077 isn't just some small blip on the radar, but this has some staying power. And the reviews for the past 30 days have been overwhelmingly positive, with 90% of those reviews recommending this game to somebody else. The initial resurgence we saw with Cyberpunk 2077 thanks to Edgerunners was insane, but I would argue this staying power the game is seeing right now makes it one of the craziest comebacks in video game history. And I think it's really important to highlight this. CDPR got a ton of negative attention for the decisions they made or statements they made around this game, especially before and during release. But now it does genuinely feel like, with subsequent updates, CDPR took their time. They made sure to get things right and even further invested into their IP, and now we're seeing the results of that. We're seeing it pay off for them. But that's not all, as we also got some updates on the future of Edgerunners, or really lack thereof a future of Edgerunners. As just recently, a producer of the Cyberpunk anime that propelled the game back into the limelight was asked during an interview, courtesy of Google Translate because the original interview is in Japanese, about a potential sequel to Edgerunners. And they do say, "I personally would like to continue to work with Japanese studios and create more animation works, partly because I received such a good evaluation. However, to avoid misunderstanding, Cyberpunk Edgerunners is originally a standalone work. So there is no such thing as I'm actually working on Season 2 behind the scenes. Even if we can make an anime in the future, I don't know if it'll be a Season 2 or a completely different work." Which, without spoilers, this is actually very unsurprising. I think a lot of people did not expect for there to be a Season 2. They just wanted more of that Edgerunners beauty. Although it is nice to get a more official and proper response around this. But don't fret, because there is more content coming. CDPR just gave us a massive roadmap update for their studio. Now, if you somehow missed this news, basically they are creating a dedicated CD Projekt Red North America to work on the next Cyberpunk game, and at the same time, CD Projekt Red EU will be working on a Witcher game in tandem, so they'll be developing these 2 games side by side, but also they're hiring some people to remake some of their older games, as CDPR also just announced it hired Fool's Theory, a studio made up of some former Witcher developers, to remake the original Witcher game from the ground up in Unreal Engine 5. There are not a ton of details on this out there right now. We know it just started production. Again, this is a ground up recreation of The Witcher 1 in Unreal Engine 5, so there likely will be some modernizations around this game, which is definitely a very good thing. Sometimes the gameplay in The Witcher 1 can be kind of rough, especially going from The Witcher 3, but honestly at this point it's kind of hard to ignore how good the future of CDPR looks right now. They have a massive layup with Cyberpunk. Edgerunners was massive, Cyberpunk 2077 is seeing an unprecedented resurgence, and they still have several updates and an expansion on the way with an even larger audience for those products. And they're taking the time they need to get this expansion right, or at least that's the way things seem to be happening. But then even further expanding their company and developing a second studio to keep their IPs active. This is quite literally what people have been begging Bethesda to do for a decade, but CDPR, they are taking action. Although speaking of things not laying dormant, we also have the next update for Cyberpunk 2077, which is probably going to be patch 1.61. We know this is going to have this crazy new ray tracing overdrive mode from Nvidia, but it seems like CDPR is also adding in some further graphical upgrades to Cyberpunk. Modders just recently found that with patch 1.6, CDPR actually added in a few hidden features to the game, as there's now new settings for crowd density and traffic density, where you could actually turn them up a tick higher. So Night City will be even more full, more people on the sidewalks, more people on the streets, and of course more people driving. But of course by default these are hidden. You're gonna have to download a mod on PC to actually get these settings to be available, and then you can turn things up to astonishing if you want to. Overall it's a relatively minor thing, but definitely exciting. It seems like this next Cyberpunk update, even if it's a relatively minor one, will be bringing some considerable visual upgrades to the game for those of you that are fortunate enough to have the highest end of systems. But even beyond that, we have seen mods getting regular updates, and CDPR continues to promote mod support for this game with their ongoing tutorial series. Some pretty big mods are already in the works with the new tools, and more animation related mods coming is one of the big hopes of the community right now. But even as of late, we've been getting some pretty awesome new content, like this new mod that just came out that allows you to pet nibbles, an essential feature of every game that is finally in Cyberpunk 2077. Although what is likely the best update for Cyberpunk 2077 may still be ahead of us, and that is patch 1.7. Based off what's been described, it seems like patch 1.7 will really be the one that does the new stuff, not just bug fixes or minor changes here or there, but some actual overhauls and new content in this game. Some of the confirmed things on the way are a complete overhaul to the cop system, featuring vehicle-to-vehicle combat and even some potential max tac upgrades. There's been some pushback around this in the community saying, well, do we really need a police overhaul? Is that what people really want as far as new content for this game? And I think this is a really good thing, and I'll explain why. If you've never played with those police chase mods out there already on PC, one of the most defining aspects of them is just the fun factor. Police chases and shooting from cars add in this amazing sandbox component to Night City, where sometimes you'll just get caught up desperately trying to flee the police and seeing what kind of crazy stunts you can do when fighting them. It makes this particular aspect of the game infinitely more interactable, and with mods alone I have dumped numerous hours messing around here, causing havoc, creating the most disastrous scene I can, and then trying to run away from it as the police chase me. I literally have hours of footage of doing this type of stuff because I almost always get carried away because it's just so much fun. Once CDPR adds it in officially, there will surely be many more hours to be spent doing this. So although I do understand the sentiment of a police overhaul not necessarily having the biggest impact on the game, I think you really have to consider the fun factor that does come with something like that. But also, what could end up being definitely more impactful is a new gameplay loop for Melee. And immediately after they mentioned this in the video, they actually also mentioned new actions in the perk tree as well, which I think could tie together with the Melee overhaul. One of the big problems with Melee right now in Cyberpunk is really the lack of depth. It really boils down to just spamming attacks at enemies and trying to achieve as high of damage as possible here. Most of the time, the enemies don't do much in response. Occasionally, you will have some kind of response, but most of the time, not much. A really great way to overhaul the system would be enemies being more responsive, like blocks being more common, or even requiring you to consider things like countering. But I think more actions being added by perks could also really take this to the next level. Like if there were a variety of different melee weapon abilities you could use, a power slash, or some kind of overhead slam with a melee weapon. But of course, you'd need the right perk to actually unlock the ability to use that, and then you could spend perk points to make it even more powerful. It'll change up the dynamic of gameplay, give you an even more powerful single-use move that you'll have to play around. And we do know that, at least as of right now, some new melee weapons are in the files of the game, so it's very likely that these will be added with the next update whenever this Melee overhaul does come out. And lastly, there'll be some more cyberware feeling cyberware. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but honestly, one of the things I would love to see is more cyberware looking cyberware. Being able to truly chrome yourself out visually in Cyberpunk 2077, I think could be a pretty cool feature. But overall, the big takeaway is if you're considering getting into Cyberpunk 2077, now is the perfect time. Mods are better than ever. The next major update will probably be the best one yet, and there is a new expansion coming at some point in 2023. And if all of that somehow wasn't enough, there's like 5 new games coming from CDPR. Things are just looking up for this game, for this company, and really for this franchise. And hopefully you found this update informative on what is going on and why things are so great right now. With that said though, as always again, I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.